Let me start by saying that there's nothing in this world that brings me greater joy than seeing Tom Cruise grinning ear to ear, thanking me, that I saw his movie. That is what the movies are fucking about, not Nicole Kidman coming on screen after a 50 billion previews telling me how fucking perfect the movies are, walking in the rain, watching shit that I'm sure she's never watched. No, Tom Cruise sitting in a chair, just smiling, talking at me, talking to the audience. That's what the movies are about. It's crazy that it's now been like 4 years since I made a video on the original Top Gun, basically because I saw it on TV one day and I wanted to make a video about it. And I wasn't even a particular fan of the original Top Gun. But what I have become is a massive Tom Cruise fan. I'm at the point where anything that he is in, I will see. And Top Gun Maverick, it's a quality movie, no doubt. Is it as good as I hoped? Did I think it was as great, as sturdy as some critics had hyped it up to be? No. I think it is lackluster in some respects, but largely, you're getting what your money's worth. Like Tom motherfucking Cruise, shit-eating grin on his face, on a motorcycle, with golden sunlight at his back. That's what you want out of Top Gun Maverick. Not even the flying. Who cares about the flying? You're there for Tom Cruise. And it really is more about Tom than anything else. It's about him, Maverick. He's a relic from the past. Doesn't matter. He's still better than everyone else. He still can kick ass in the air like no one else. And it's a metaphor for Tom Cruise at this point. Yes, he is old. Yes, he is really from the past, but he's just as good as anyone else. It doesn't even bother with you trying to pass on to the new guard. It's about tradition. It's about how the old guard, these people that were making movies in the 80s, are really still at the top of their game and still better from any shit that you're getting because Tom Cruise is just that good. And that sub-story, that really, the allegory, what we're really talking about here is Tom Cruise. That's what Top Gun Maverick is about, his legacy, and it honestly is more interesting than the main plot, which I'll get to in a second, but I have to cut this now because I'm running out of breath. Here's the thing. I love that this movie is able to do everything right with Tom's legacy, yada, yada, yada. It's going to give a lot of extra value to this film. When Tom Cruise ranking lists are made later in his career, I bet you that this will get a boost because of how introspective it is in regards to Tom Cruise. But when it comes to the main story, I must say, riding the highs of Mission Impossible, Rogue Nation, and Fallout, I was kind of clouded in my vision with this one because I forgot just how surface level the original Top Gun is. It is filled with a bunch of exposition. It's a very expositional heavy movie. It has a lot of obvious dramatic cues, and all of that carries over here. A lot of this movie can be quite boring in regards to just explaining the mission and the times they have to hit, the things they have to strike down. It's just very simplistic in that regard. And you still, like the first one, don't get a very good sense of who the enemy is. It's like if the original Star Wars, the final enemy wasn't Darth Vader, it was just one of those random TIE fighter pilots. And it's very hard to really get invested in the ultimate triumph of these characters because you really don't know what's going on. In my opinion, I'm a pretty perceptive movie guy. I watch a lot of movies, all right? And I've watched The Big Fucking Sleep, okay? And that's about as convoluted as anything. And I still missed who was the main enemy in this. I heard something about NATO, a NATO base at the beginning. I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense if the US is attacking NATO, right? I don't know. I honestly don't know who the base was controlled by. What's the strategic relevance of this? Yeah, something is dangerous and against US interests, but you don't get anything beyond that. And so the exposition, despite being so much of it, is really not informative at all. We have, okay, you have to hit these targets, you have to go here in this amount of time, but that of course doesn't mean anything. So a lot of this is just complicated airflow, in the words of one Logan Roy, or not Logan Roy, his fucking son, Jeremy Irons from Succession. A lot of the dialogue here just doesn't mean anything. Like Maverick saying, oh, you can't think up there. Or Val Kilmer's character Iceman saying that it's time to let go. Like, no fucking shit. Everything is just, or not everything, but a lot of lines of dialogue are just so obvious, so browbeaten. And the thing is, with modern blockbusters, I've always said this, a major strength is that they're so digestible. Even something as mediocre as the Multiverse of Madness, it's hard to get particularly bothered by the film. And so, same goes here. It's not something that's going to really bother you, really irk you during the first watch in a theater. Rewatch value, that's another story entirely. But I must say that the screenplay, while subpar in many respects, isn't a huge detractor from the film. It does keep it from being really great. You feel kind of hollow by the end of it, like the screenplay just could have been more consistent overall, but it wasn't too much of a detractor for the experience for me. While we're on the topic of rewatch value, I must say I will probably never watch the first 20 minutes of this movie again. It was borderline tedious. How much was shown in the trailers, how much you could expect everything going on beat by beat. And the movie, another thing that really holds it back from being great is the predictability. You know really who's going to die and who's not. You know who's going to make up with who. You know that some lines are going to be said again because they're obviously important. Again, is this something that I should have expected because I didn't remember how simplistic the first Top Gun was? Perhaps, but that doesn't make me feel any less disappointed, even if slightly disappointed, with the experience of this movie. I just thought it could have been a little more erratic in terms of plot structure, a little less predictable, because I didn't feel that the moments that were predictable, that obviously were coming, were played up with enough camp to make them particularly funny or memorable. It was just like, yeah, I knew this was going to happen. This really isn't emotionally complex in any way. Wasn't too thrilled with any turn the story took. And that, again, just keeps it from being great. And I don't mean to relentlessly shit on this movie. It is a good movie. I'm locked in at a 3.5 out of 5. But, you know, the critiques are coming to mind and I gotta voice them. Like, the first Top Gun has certain essential elements to it that it gives it long-lasting appeal. The dirtiness of it, the hokiness, the sexiness, and it's just all gone here. It's non-existent. And in some ways that's good, in some ways that's bad. It's bad in something like the football scene where you're trying for such a sterile PG-13 experience and then you're trying to replicate something so hokey, so ridiculous, doesn't work at all. At the same time, I think it is utterly hilarious that the sex scene between Tom Cruise and Jennifer Connelly is a montage of them talking. I think that is uproarious in terms of laugh quality. Seriously, if you want a testament to how unsexy movies are nowadays, look no further than that they sterilized the Top Gun franchise. Good Lord. And is that really a bad thing? I don't know, but there's a certain personality to that first Top Gun simply not present here. Absolutely not. At the same time, though, and now we're getting into the good stuff here, by making it so B-movie quality in some places, something like Goose's death comes up, doesn't work at all. At all, like I said 4 years ago. Total shift, totally unnatural. Here, tone totally consistent. Not a single moment in this movie that you're going to be like, I don't fucking believe that. That's not right. You may think, okay, that's not a great line of dialogue. That's overly obvious. But nothing is out of place. And that is so essential when you have something like Multiverse of Madness making some of the worst goddamn jokes you will hear in your whole life. This is like the perfect balance of what you want out of a blockbuster in terms of comedy and making you laugh. Well, let's face it, most people that even go to see this movie, if the flying scenes are good, they'll be satisfied. And the flying scenes are stellar, as you'd expect with a modern Tom Cruise movie. But setting aside the final sequence, I saw this movie in IMAX, and usually I'm very anti-IMAX. I really don't think it contributes a lot. It contributed here. Like, there's a scene where Tom Cruise is pulling up in a trial run, and the back of my seat is shaking, and I can feel pressure on my neck, and it's probably the most immersed I have ever been in an IMAX experience. Seriously. I mean, it was really impressive how these training sequences, where you know the stakes are incredibly low, still immerse you. Again, is that something that doesn't hold up outside of an IMAX experience? Maybe, but I will say that some of these scenes, the amount of tension it could muster, just by the audio effects, just by seeing the pressure on these people's faces, the way that Tom's right eye fucking contorts due to the pressure that he's sustaining in a fighter jet, unbelievable. Seriously impressive work from them. And again, just another reason why Tom Cruise and his stunt work is just a marvel to behold. And the final fight sequence, expertly done. Scene of the year material. Could not be better paced. It could not be more clearly communicated where the heroes and antagonists are. Could not be more clearly communicated how much danger the heroes are in. Could not be a better mix of special effects and the people actually flying could not be a better mix of off time when the characters are safe and when they're actively fighting the enemy. Stupendous from beginning to end. And if you've seen this enough of this channel, you know that a final fight scene to me is huge. It is a huge factor for me in how much I enjoy an action film. You gotta ramp up to a big action climax if you're an action movie. You can't have a fucking stellar action scene in the middle and have the last one not live up to that. Absolutely not. That'll tick me off to no end. And for this film to accomplish that final scene, just immensely impressive and something that I know I'll be rewatching over and over again. Other high points, the romance actually feels essential. It is not intrusive in the slightest. There's not a bad performance in sight here. Everyone is quite good. Jon Hamm, my boy, brings his fucking A game, like always. Turns a dog shit ass role into gold. Anyone else plays that role, no one cares. Because it's Jon Hamm, automatically memorable. Pure legend shit from him, as always. It's not as pretty as Tony Scott's original, but there are plenty of striking, beautiful shots in here that makes it feel like a worthy successor to that film in terms of cinematography. It does just enough, has just enough winks and nods to the first one without being gratuitous fan service. And might I add, this is the first film in which people have clapped in the middle of it, not Star Wars or Marvel. And it wasn't a return or anything, it wasn't with Iceman. It's when fucking Maverick is circling the boat at the end and Jon Hamm ducks, and it's just a cool moment for Maverick, which just says a lot about the type of people that were there tonight, the way this movie connected with them. It fucking connected with the audience. Like when I was watching Jackass Forever, even though I think that is a better film than this, I must say there was like no laughing for the first 20 minutes. People were not behind that. This was a theater that was packed. Everyone was engaged with it. It may not stand the test of time as well as one might hope. I do think that it is a slightly disappointing experience. I think it could have been better, especially in regards to the screenplay. But what I care about most is that I don't feel empty at the end of a movie-going experience. And I came out the end of this not feeling like it totally shat upon the first movie or that it just wasn't a good one at all. I walked out of this, I was like, that was really good. I want to see more movies at the theater. That was super enjoyable. And I think that constitutes Top Gun Maverick as a success. It's a 3.5 out of 5. I guess, I don't know, a 7.2 out of 10 if we're getting specific, maybe the low end. But overall, just really solid work.